Hey guys, Brandon Johnson here, and thanks for joining me today. I wanted to make another video on the basics of guitar playing and a couple of things about scales that I learned when I first started playing guitar. When my dad was teaching me guitar, he told me about two scales that I should learn. And they're both pentatonic scales, which means that they're 5-tone scales. They have 5 notes in them. A normal scale has 7 notes. A pentatonic scale has 5 notes. So what he told me about is he said, there's 2 scales that you should learn if you want to learn how to solo. There's the country scale and the blues scale. So the country scale, I learned later on, is actually the major pentatonic scale, and the blues scale is also a pentatonic scale. So when we look at the difference between the country scale and the blues scale, I learned later on that the country scale is actually the major pentatonic scale. The blues scale is the major pentatonic scale slid up 4 frets. So let's look at the difference between the country scale and the blues scale. So when we talk about the country scale and the blues scale, what we're really talking about is the same scale moved up 4 frets. So if we're in the key of A, with no capo on, you can think of your country scale as being centered around this chord position. Okay, so just the basic A chord. Your country scale is going to be a pentatonic scale that occupies the 3 frets where this chord position are. So those notes are okay? So your root note in this case is going to be here. Obviously your A. You're still out of your root note of A, but your pentatonic shape is going to be right here. And that's your root. So if we're in the key of A, that's your country scale. And if we're talking about the pentatonic scale, we're talking about, in my mind, the most basic form of the pentatonic scale. And if you're playing the country scale, that form is going to occupy the 3 frets where this chord starts. Right here. So it's going to be right there. So that's the country scale for the key of A. Now let's say we wanted to play into the blues scale in the key of A. We can still play an A major and play the blues scale. But the blues scale is going to be this exact same form, this exact same basic pentatonic scale form, moved up 4 frets. So instead of playing the basic pentatonic scale over this chord position, we're going to move that basic pentatonic scale up 4 frets. 1, 2, 3, 4, to this chord position. Okay, so we're going to play that same basic pentatonic scale, except we're going to play it over the 3 frets that occupy this chord position. So it's going to be right here. Okay, and that's our blues scale. Now our blues scale, the root is here, instead of here, right? Where we played the country scale, the root note was here. Now with the blues scale, the root note is here. Now it's the same basic pentatonic scale pattern that we played down here for the country scale, for the open A chord here, but it's just moved up 4 frets. So let me give you an example of that. So we're going to play a basic A major chord over a tempo with no chord changes, just the A major chord, so that you can hear the difference between the country scale and the blues scale. So I'm going to start with the country scale, which is here. And I'm going to play that for 2 measures. And then after 2 measures, I'm going to switch to the blues scale, which is right here. 1, 2, 3, 4. so you can kind of hear the difference there between the country scale and the blues scale, and the way that they sound slightly different. I mean, there's a lot more to it technically, but it's just a great way to think about the scales in simplistic terms, and it's just a nice, easy way to think about how to apply those scales when you're actually playing. And you can play both of the scales over the major chord. However, there's certain chord progressions where the country scale works better, and there's certain other chord progressions where the blues scale works better. And you just kind of have to differentiate between the two and the kind of sound that you're going for. So Tony Rice was kind of more of a blues pentatonic player, and Norman Blake was kind of more of a country scale major pentatonic player. And they both use notes from each scale, but the overall sound and the feel of their playing could be differentiated that way. So Tony Rice played more of the blues style, and Norman Blake played more of the major or the country style. A lot of times you'll stick to just one scale. You might just take a solo in just the country scale or just the pentatonic scale, but it's also possible to switch back and forth between the two in the middle of a solo, just to create kind of like a feel change. Okay, so we're thinking about the country scale and the blues scale in the key of A, and we don't have a capo on right now, so we're thinking about it in terms of chord position. So the country scale is kind of centered around this chord position, and the blues scale is kind of centered around this chord position. So they're both the same chord. They're both A major, but it's just a matter of where the basic pentatonic scale shape that we learned is going to be played over, whether it's going to be played over this chord shape or this chord shape. And when you're soloing, when you're playing scales, I like to think of scales in terms of chords. So I like to think about, the relationship between the scale and the chord, because it really is all the same, because the notes from the scale are the notes from the chord and vice versa. So what about when we introduce a capo, right? So now we've got capo 2, so we're in the key of A, and we're in capo 2. Well, what is the country scale when you have a capo over 2? Because, we're not playing this chord position anymore because we have a capo there now. Well, the country scale in this chord position is just the G major scale, the G major position scale, right? So when we introduce a capo, the scale is still the same. However, this fret is now barred, right? So an A is going to look like a G to us. Now that we have a capo on the second fret, our A chord is now going to be a G shape. Okay, we're still in the key of A major, and we're still playing our country scale. So basically, we're going to be playing the exact same scale. However, it's going to be in an open G shape. So it's going to be. Famous lick in it, of course. That's that famous lick, that famous bluegrass lick. That's in the country scale. So that's a country lick. You can kind of think of it that way. And these words are arbitrary, but that's kind of how I think of this. So, so that famous bluegrass lick, that's going to be your country scale right there. And then if you want to go into the blues while you have capo 2, well, all you got to do is go up to your A major bar chord right there, and you're going to play the exact same scale that you did before. Of course, when you're soloing, you're going to play a little bit more stylized, and you're going to add in some open strings, right, and some half tones. Make it sound like the blues. So really the only distinction is when you have a capo, you're not playing the country scale out of this chord shape anymore, out of the open A chord shape. You're playing your country scale, if you're capoed, out of your open G chord shape. You're still playing the A scale because you're capoed up, but you're now playing it out of this G shape. So it's just a great way to think about scales, and it's a really uncomplicated and simple way to think about scales, which is really helpful if you're playing live or if you're just starting out learning scales.